Hello, everybody. Welcome. I'm so grateful to have you all here today. We're welcoming Raymond Charlie for our storytelling session. We're so grateful to have you here today, Raymond, and to share with us. We'd like to thank the Department of Canadian Heritage, who provided the funding for this storytelling session. It's very important for truth telling and for learning about what happened, and so we're really thankful. We're thankful to have you here today, Raymond. We're going to start our session off today with Doug Harris Tolquilum, our cultural leader. He's going to start us off in a good way, so I'll pass it over to you, Doug. Thank you.
Thanks, Courtney. Nawilam. Welcome, everyone. My traditional name is Tolquilum Heichka Courtney. Thank you. Just wanted to share a little bit of my opening prayer using a little bit of our Halkaminum language. So again, I'm from the Coast Salish territory here in Semanis, and it's my honor to open up in a good way. Osiem. Steeds te sjouw wenst. Zie hem na salchwan. Na zie ja. Na eli schwatlekwa. Heitsepka. De kwasjalla. Met een kweel. Jaatselt. Pretty watselt. Take with sensei. Oh, it's a ni tehumni almost to ice squallow. Oh, it's a ni hakushit at not so much squallow. The ton of quail. E to muck square. Scotland stuff. Oh, see him. Uncle. You see.
Thank you so much, Doug. Thanks for opening us up in a good way. So, bonjour, Anin, Cornine and Dishnakas, Makunandudam. My name is Courtney Crane. I do media and communications here at the First Nations Housing and Infrastructure Council. I'm very happy to be here with you all today for part of this important session. It is our Coming Home storytelling series. The Department of Canadian Heritage provided some funding so that we could bring this series to you. What we wanted to do is we wanted to provide a platform for survivors to share their stories. And so today we have Raymond Charlie with us. He's the third speaker in our storytelling series, and we're so grateful to have him here. This session will be recorded, and it'll be available on our website in the next few days. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass it over to Raymond. Thank you so much, Raymond. I'm so grateful for you and for sharing with us. Yeah, it's great to have you here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Courtney. Thank you to my nephew, Doug, for the prayer. I think that's always a great to touch with our culture and to pray. I think that's very important that it's always been the way of our people to have a prayer and to remember all the survivors out there today across the lands, because I think there's like 150,000 survivors. I always say I'm only one of them. And of course, we must remember all the intergenerational people who are going through a lot of pain and a lot of trauma also because of what their grandparents and their parents have endured. So usually it's always nice to remember them because we all need to heal. We all need to become strong. We all need to become proud as a people. So I'm really hoping that this platform really helps to educate people across the lands. It's very important that they understand what occurred to our people. Usually when I talk, I always say we can't judge our people. And I especially think about our people who are in the streets today. Some of our people who are living in the streets, having a very difficult time. Many of them are involved in alcohol or drugs. And I always tell people, please don't judge them. They're living in trauma. They're living in with a lot of pain. And a lot of them can't speak about what occurred in their lives or what occurred in their families. There have been so much abuses that have occurred specifically from residential schools. Residential schools were such a hard place for our people because it has been long lasting. It's an experience that lasts forever. We can't erase our experiences, or we can't erase what occurred to us, and that goes for all the trauma and all the pain that we live with every day. But I'm very fortunate. I went to the residential school at Cooper Island starting in 1963-64. I was initially a day scholar. But as it moved on, 1967, I moved into the residential school. And then, you know, it was at that time, I was, even before that, I was learning about residential school. As a day scholar, I should say, I made friends with one of the young men in the residential school, and he brought me on a walk around the residential school grounds one day. And this was a very painful walk, and he was very sincere and very honest with me. And he said, well, I have to tell you what happened. What I'm going to show you is what our people have been going through. And I was a very young person. I was just a very young teenager, as was he. But he said, I just got to tell you. So as he brought me around, we went to the far end of the soccer field. There was a big steel barrel, big drum. It was one of those storage tanks they had for fuel, and it was cut off. The top was cut off, and it had a door in there. And he says, well, I want to show you. This right here is called the incinerator. And I said, it's okay. I was nodding my head looking at him. And he said, this is where they burn the babies. And I was looking at him. Burn the babies? He says, yeah, some of our young girls have children that are born here in this residential school, and they just throw them into the incinerator. And I was quite surprised. So we kept walking around, and then he walked along the fence, and we walked along the soccer field. Then we came to a small house, and there was a big apple tree there. And he said, this is where they buried some of the babies that were born to right under the apple tree. And I was quite surprised, you know, as the years and time have gone by, I've learned so much from other survivors. I listened to an elder who was a bit older than I am, and he was involved at Cooper Island residential school. He said, I used to have to wrap up the babies in the sacks and put rocks in them and throw them in the water off the residential school at Cooper Island. But that's a lot of pain, and that's a lot of trauma to live with for our people. And those are actual things that occurred. And people must learn to understand. A lot of our young ladies and a lot of our young children have had these experiences. And usually when they share it, they're very so honest. You know, when our people talk, they don't like to add words or add things onto what they're talking about. They're very truthful, they're very straightforward. And I think that's what I always try to do when I talk today. So anyway, I got into the residential school in 1967. And I actually, that was after being a day scholar for 63 up to 67. I was a day scholar. I moved in residential school in 67. So anyway, I was doing grade 7, I guess, grade 7. So I was very young. That was in January of 67. So that was just into the new year. I was put into the school band, and we actually went to Montreal, Expo 67. So anyway, the young brother who was in charge of that, he initially asked me and my brother, said, well, I would like to invite you two to come with me to Montreal Expo. And so we agreed with him. But anyway, as it turned out, I understand he was going to be leaving Cooper Island or the residential school. So they fundraised all that from January till June, and they were able to raise funds for the whole school band from Cooper Island to go to Expo. So we were able to do that. They raised the airfare, and International Clubs of Montreal paid for all the accommodation for the motel for the week, and they also paid for camping for the school band. So anyway, we were there for a little over a week, and so anyway, on the last night, they put up a big banquet, and they had all the silverware out, and our school band was sitting at these long tables, and I was asked to give the speech to the club members, and so I got up and I spoke and I thanked them. So anyway, that night we had to go back and pack our little bags and get ready to head back to British Columbia from Montreal. And the next morning, as we're all getting onto the bus and getting ready to go back to the airport in Montreal, our supervisor, Brian Newfor, came over to my brother and myself. He says, "Oh, you guys just leave your bags here." He said, "You're going to be staying with me here in Montreal for August." And we're quite surprised because he didn't even talk to us about that at all, but he just told us that we would be staying with him. So we agreed with him anyway, and we took our little bags off the bus and got into the cab and went to his parents' place out in Greenfield Park in Montreal, and we met his parents. So we stayed there. So we were sleeping in the basement, and there was one bedroom down there, and there was a living room. And so there was just me and my brother. So he said, well, tonight, he said, Tony, you can go have that bedroom. James is going to sleep with me here on the hide a bed, you know, pull out hide a bed there in the basement. And we just nodded our head in agreement. And so anyway, I went to sleep, and the next morning we had our breakfast. And so later on that evening, he looks at me, well, your turn to sleep down here with me on a hide a bed, James, and go into the bedroom. And I just said, okay. So the next day, my brother looks at me, he says, did he do some funny things to you? And I just nodded my head because he was still with us. But that was my first encounter with sexual abuse from a brother. And he was Brian Dufour. And actually, he was one of the ones that was he moved to, I think, Alberta, or he was back in Ontario looking after foster children. And the children were coming forth and talking about him sexually abusing them. So I was contacted by the RCMP, and I think it was Ottawa. They said, well, we would like to fly you out here to speak about your sexual abuse with Dufour. And I said, okay, I'll do that. So anyway, it must have been about 3 or 4 weeks later, I got a call from the police, the RCMP, and they said, well, we won't require your services because Brian Dufour died. And I don't know if he died in prison or if he died in jail, but anyway, he died. So anyway, it comes September of 67. I moved into grade 8 and back into the Cooper Island Residential School. And that was what they call the year of integration. They were finally allowing our children into the regular school system. So I was going into grade 8 that year. So there wasn't very many of us boys at that time. They called me a senior, even though I was very young. I was one of the older seniors, and I was going into grade 8. So they said, well, I got to the residential school, and they said, well, you're going to have this room here just before the dorm, because the dorm was initially one big dorm with a lot of beds all lined up, but they broke it up into cubicles and they put bunk beds in each one. So my new supervisor was oh gosh, Glenn Dowdy. And I don't know, he was one of those guys, either curly hair and dark rim glasses, much like mine. And so he put me in a room with my friend Felix for a couple of weeks. Then he comes over to me one night. He says, well, I think we got so much room here. He said, I would like to give you your own room. And I looked at him, okay. So anyway, he brought me down to the far end, past the boys' bathroom, the big, large bathroom, and walked down the far end of the floor there. And there was down the far end, it was kind of isolated. There was 2 rooms down there, and one of them was only about 10 by 10, and it had just one bunk bed in there and 2 big, large windows on the side. And I sat there talking with him, and He said, well, this is your room. I said, okay. So I went to sleep. A couple of nights later, he comes over. He said, well, he said, I think we should get to know each other. I said, okay. He said, I want you to come to my room later on if you got some time. And I was so young and I was so naive, and I wasn't very worldly. I didn't know much about anything. I had no thoughts of being safe or being unsafe or anything. So, you know, just like being innocent and stuff. So I said, okay. So I went to his room that evening, and I was talking to him. He had a desk there with a chair, and by the window, there was 2 windows there, and he had his bed there. So we talked away and talked, and then he said, well, he said, oh, I think it's time to go to bed, go to sleep. He said, come here. And I looked at him. What? He said, come here. You can come lay on this side here. And I've never, ever gone into anyone's bed other than sleep with my brothers. One of my brothers, I've never laid in bed with anybody else. So I laid there, and I was really feeling very uncomfortable about it. So, but anyway, he turned around, he turned the light out and behind him, turned it off. Okay. Turned it off, and then he says, good night. Then he stuck his hands into my pajamas, and he started fiddling with my penis. So he brought me to ejaculation, and then he grabbed my hand and put it on his penis. He said, here, rub it, he said. And it was so dark in the room, and I was just scared. I was just so nervous. So I did that. And anyway, all that night, I was just laying there I couldn't sleep. I was just so nervous and so scared. And I was so restless. I couldn't close my eyes. So anyway, the next morning it started to get light. So I got up right away, and I walked to the I walked over to the door, and I grabbed it, and I went to my room, and I got all my clothing and my stuff, get ready for school. So but that was the second account I had with sexual abuse, and this was from a different brother Dowdy. And so anyway, that was not very comfortable. It was so difficult for me. I would always ignore him. I would try to stay away from him. I wouldn't go around him when he was by himself or anything. So I always stayed with other guys and tried to be so I wouldn't have any encounters with him at all. So anyway, I go to school. And so when I was at the school one day, I got called over the speaker, Tony, Charlie, and they named 4 or 5 other kids. They said, you're all excused from school today. And I was thinking, oh, wow, I'm getting off school today. And they said, well, you're going to go see the dentist today. So I was quite surprised. I was getting out of school today. So we got on the old St. Louis cargo boat, and we got to Chimines, and there was a panel wagon. We all walked up, and we got into the panel wagon, and we got a ride to Ladysmith. So we got dentist office, and we're all lined up outside his office, his dentist office, and on chairs. Pretty soon he called me, and I went in and I sat down on his dental chair. Then he finished examining me, and he says, well, he says, you know what? You look like a tough guy. You're a tough guy, aren't you? And I was looking. Why is he saying you're a tough guy? But anyway, I needed 3 fillings, and he began to do dental filling without any freezing. In the old days, in the 60s, the dental drills, they didn't have water like they do today. When you do drill the teeth, the water kind of helps the drill and stuff. So, but anyway, I opened my eyes and I could see the smoke coming up from the drill, you know, from my mouth and stuff. But it was so painful having 3 little fillings done in my mouth with no freezing. So anyway, that was very difficult. So at night I would go to my bed in the dark, and I would go to sleep in that bunk bed. I was on the lower bunk bed. One night I was just laying there sleeping away, and my head was grabbed my head, and it was Dowdy again. I couldn't even see him. I could only feel his presence there in his hands. But anyway, what happened is he grabbed my hair, and he grabbed me, and he put his penis into my mouth, into his mouth, my mouth. He shoved his penis in there. But anyway, that was the other part of sexual abuse. He would do that until oh gosh, that was like mid-December. So that was like a little over 3 months he was doing that with me. And it was so hard because I would be sleeping away and he'd come and he'd do that to me time and time again. So finally one night I was laying there before I turned the light out, and I looked up above me, and there was the top bunk bed. I said, well, I think I'm going to move up to the top. So I climbed up to the top of the bunk bed, and I slept there, and he never bothered me. But I think he must have begun to abuse another young boy, because eventually, I think it was in 1997 or around 2003, 2001, maybe somewhere around there. We all got together. There was 13 of us individuals. We pressed charges for sexual abuse against Dowdy, and we brought him to court in Nanaimo. And he only got 3 years. He was sentenced for 3 years in prison for sexually abusing 13 of us. And that was so difficult because he ruined our lives. A lot of our young men have passed away. Some committed suicide, and it's so difficult to live with the experiences of sexual abuse. So anyway, I was quite surprised he only got such a small sentence for that. But that was the court justice in Canada. I don't think there's any justice there really when you look at that, because I really feel we should be the judges ourselves. We should be the ones to help establish what he's going to get in prison. So, but that didn't occur. A lot of the young men I went to school with who wouldn't press charges against Dowdy, a lot of them became alcoholics and stuff. So, as did I. I was involved in alcohol a lot when I was very young, because it's a hard thing to live when you're being abused sexually. So, especially in your mind and your heart, it's a trauma. It's a traumatic thing, and usually you have no one to speak to about it at all. So anyway, it comes out 2008. I graduated from grade 8 in Chemanis, and I was moved into another residential school called St. Mary's in Mission City. I was going into grade 9 and 10 up there. So anyway, I was with the older boys again, even though I was not that old. I was with the older boys up there. There was probably between 40 and 50 of the young men there. So anyway, one night we're all sitting there and then watching hockey. Montreal was playing against Chicago, original 6 team, and they're all gathered around the rec room, they call it. All the chairs were lined up in front of the TV. And crazy old me, I walked to the front and I put my foot right up on a chair right beneath the TV, and I was sitting there watching TV right beneath the TV, and I was the one right in the front of the room, so I couldn't see what was going on behind me. Anyway, the room was very dark because the lights were turned out. And then I heard this voice, "What are you doing here?" And I turned to look to my right, and I was punched really hard. I got knocked down to the floor, and I was on my hands and my knees, and my head was spinning. And I was still kind of groggy and stuff, and then I got backhanded right across the cheek, and my head turned. As my head turned, I could see all the chairs were empty behind me. But I didn't realize that study had started for our young men. A lot of them went to study and they didn't even tell me there was time for study at all. They just left me sitting there in the front watching hockey by myself. But those are incidences of abuse that I had. And they were very long lasting. They were very difficult. I had such a hard time in my life living, especially with the sex abuse, especially not being able to have anyone talk about it at all. So I was quite happy. I think in 2013, I was finally, they opened up residential school counseling for survivors, and I signed up for it right away. And my survivor says, well, or my counselor says, well, I would like to tell you, just to write down what issues you're feeling today, because I went through the resentment. I went through so many different issues as a survivor, and I wrote them down on papers every week. And a lot of times I would break down and I would cry. And I think one of the biggest things I had was trust issues and stuff. So that's one thing I've learned, is that I will always use my voice, and I always to try to be very honest. So anyway, we went through a year and a half of counseling. My counselor one day says to me, well, I think we need you to write a book. And I looked at him very serious. Write a book? He says, yeah, I think you should write a book. And I was very surprised. And it was only, I guess, then the 2013, I thought about it. So I started to write. So anyway, it took me over 7 years of writing and editing. So I did write my book. It's called in the shadow of the red brick building. And this is the picture of the residential school here. And on the far end was that bedroom that I had right here, my little bedroom that I had all by myself, and where I had the sexual abuse. But anyway, I think it's really important that people understand that what we had to deal with in our lives. But I also think it's important that our survivors become healthy, our survivors become strong. So I will keep sharing, and I will always pray every day in our own way. I pray now a lot so that we will become very proud again as a people. We will become strong. So I am always grateful to see the young ones dance and sing and drum. And I always great to see my nephew open up the prayer there in the beginning. So I'm very thankful. But anyway, I will keep talking and I will keep sharing. Yesterday, I spoke to 100 teachers, and a lot of them were quite surprised what our people went through. So I will keep doing that. I will keep speaking. I will keep sharing. So I know we're going to close down pretty soon. So I really, I thank you all, and I'm very grateful for the invite here. So I could talk a lot longer and I could share a lot more, but I know our time is limited. So I thank you very much for the work and giving survivors an opportunity to share their stories. I always pray every day that our survivors will become strong and our survivors will become healthy, as well as all their families. I'm hoping that they will find their way and find their path to healing. So I will pray for that every day, and so that we'll become strong. So anyway, Haichka for all this work here. So thank you very much. Yes. All right.
Thank you so much for sharing with us. That was so powerful. Thank you. Now I'll pass it over to Doug to close us off in a good way.
Would be my honor. Uncle Tony, Aichka. I'm going to dedicate this song to you. It's I love you. And again, thank you for sharing your story, your courage, your bravery. Haichka, your medicine. Haichka. Netzli chata neteth, Netzli chata tach squel, Netzli chata hisnet, Netzli chuyath, Netzlich tana quail, Netzlich atamok squail, Netzlich, Netzlich, Netzlich. I love you in the morning, I love you in the afternoon, I love you in the long evening, I love you all the time, I love you today, and I love you every day. I love you, I love you, I love you. Osiem. Aichka, uncle. Osiem.